Get started. Good evening and welcome. I'm Renee Barrio, Head of Curatorial Affairs here at the McNay, and I'm happy to welcome you to the first Artists Looking at Art for 2018. And I'm delighted to be joined by Joe de la Cruz, who many of you know, and who I work with actually here at the McNay. And I just thought before we start talking about Joe and his work, I just want to, for those of you who are not familiar with this program, since 2003, we have invited artists from our community to show work in the galleries and to share information about their work and their thoughts and their and sort of their process and what motivates them with the public, so that we can all get a better understanding of what artists in our community are dealing with and thinking about and making. And it's really a way for the McNay to stay connected to San Antonio's great art community. Every year we change it up a bit. This year we're invited 4 artists, and each artist's work will be hung in the galleries for 3 months. And we are trying to, as best as possible, to integrate those works into maybe some existing program. For example, Joe's 2 beautiful drawings are hung within an exhibition called Me McNay, Sue McNay. And it's an exhibition drawn from our collection which looks at sort of domestic interiors through the eyes of many different artists. And so we were able to incorporate Joe's drawings, the t-shirts, into that exhibition, which you'll see in the Frost Galleries. After the presentation, for those of you who want to see those tonight, unfortunately, because we're doing some renovations in the museum, you'll have to actually go back outside and go through the original entrance to the McNay, the original mansion entrance, to access those galleries. You can see them for sure through till 9 o'clock. It's just you'll have to be a little cumbersome. You have to walk around and go back in. So we're just going to kind of get right to it. Again, I'm delighted to have Joe with me. I said he works here at the McNay, so Joe works on our prep staff, helping to install exhibitions. So we work very closely together. And in that process, though, I really don't know a lot about him, so because we don't sort of talk about ourselves and our art during the day. So this is an opportunity for me to learn about him as well as you. So we're going to start just kind of going back to the beginning. Tell us about where you're from and some of your sort of biography and your history, and so we know sort of who you are.
Okay, well, I've been working as a contractor doing art installation and art handling for about 5 years, just kind of making a living that way. And I've been able to work here and at the Southwest School of Art, among a whole bunch of other places, just kind of floating around, kind of like a mercenary. So before that, I was a picture framer. So the picture framing thing was kind of my avenue into the contemporary art world. I didn't really know much about it before I started picture framing, and I kind of got like a hands-on, crash course, and then kind of stayed with it for a long time, and it opened up all kinds of opportunities for me. Just here in town, I really haven't done much else. I've gone as far as Austin to work, but for the most part, it's kind of paralleled the growth of San Antonio's art scene for the past 15 years or so. And
Are you from here originally?
From here, born and raised here. I went to school here at Our Lady of the Lake University.
Did you study art there?
I did. I didn't finish school. I kind of slipped through the cracks, and I didn't really have a good advisor or counselor, so it was just kind of up to me what courses I would take, and I took kind of all my studio courses, and I didn't really take much else, and I left, and I guess I'll get into what happened after that that led me to this point, but I really wanted to kind of start with my youth and my upbringing, and kind of where I started to understand what I wanted to do, and I guess I'll just start with my mom's family, because like this picture that you see here is actually a painting. A lot of my work is based in memories, a lot of family memories, a lot of like familiar sights in town. And this particular piece, I mean, I was already exploring at probably 20, 21 years old, and this is a collaborative painting that I had the opportunity to do with my first cousin, Jerry. We were real close in age, and we kind of came up together drawing the same things and watching the same things and just very close. And so we kind of explored art together, you know, just kind of off of comic books and stuff. And that was kind of backed, though, by encouragement from my mom's family because they were all kind of creatives. Mm-hmm. There's poets and there's people that draw, there's painters, extremely good painters. My mom is a seamstress, and she kind of showed me just how to follow through on like crafting, drawing, and she definitely excelled at drawing more than anything else. Though I think she's only explored that later on, and you know, as she's kind of gotten older and gotten a chance to do that more. But she's the one that kind of now I'm doing drawings. I've done everything else, and I want to continue to explore everything else. But I just wanted to bring that up because that's her strength, and so I wanted to kind of you know, kind of give homage to that. But this picture has, like I said, it was a collaborative effort. We took a lot of family photos from the old photo albums and referenced them and replicated them on canvas. This was 2003 for the Alameda opening. This actually was something that I think Chuck Ramirez was in charge of handling. There was a community outreach to do these canvases, these large-scale canvases, and we did a.
Was this one of your first exhibitions?
Yeah, I think it was. I didn't realize that until now. That was probably the first time I showed work in public beyond school, beyond high school, or beyond Our Lady of the Lake. This is a really bad picture.
What are we looking at?
So I continued with, you know, I kind of had like this best friend, you know, that we kind of did everything together. My cousin Jerry, and so we explored youth art programs that were out around town, and we kind of excelled at our art classes in grade school and high school. They had programs in school still for art, and we kind of rose to the top a little bit there, and so this picture is kind of an extracurricular youth art program.
Are you in this picture somewhere?
Yeah, I'm over here. Let's see. I've got my wireframe glasses on up there.
With the striped shirt?
Way in the back, peeking out by the Alamo.
Oh.
So that's why I got this picture out, because this really gave me an opportunity to highlight the community art programs that were out that kind of you know, caught us and were able to kind of give us direction. And this picture is important to me because Jerry's there, who makes a living off of his art nowadays. He's a tattoo artist and makes a good living that way. And then you also have Manny Castillo in the background, Cruz Ortiz, who would pick us up from home and take us to these different extracurricular things and drive us home.
When was this?
This is 94, 95.
How old were you?
14. This particular one wasn't the biggest program that we took a part in, but I wanted to kind of show the kind of the community, you know, at that point, even just the youth programs. I mean, so much came out of those things. I mean, I remember taking part in a group that Vincent Valdez was a part of the year before, and we were always kind of aspiring to be like Vincent, you know, even at that age here in San Antonio. So this is a little bit later on. This is kind of my first exploration into you know, painting what I want to paint for myself. And at the time, cars kind of you know, took priority. I was into Volkswagens. I had Volkswagens. And then I wanted to bring up on this picture too that this is kind of, you know, I left school and I feel like I didn't learn a lot, but there's the path that I took kind of showed me a lot. For instance, this was created at Art Slam. And for anyone that doesn't know Art Slam in San Antonio, it's kind of this live art event that's backed with live music.
Where does that take place?
It happened around, I mean, I think at some point it ended up being at like the bar Limelight consistently, but initially it was just kind of, you know, three guys trying to figure out where to paint and who can play the shows, musical acts that can play the shows, and we were just trying to throw events. And two things I wanted to point out on this piece was that Art Slam, I feel like, I didn't realize until much later, but Art Slam kind of showed me how to organize, how to throw events, and how to paint on the spot, how to paint live in front of people. And
Was this done in front of an audience?
That was done in front of people, yeah. That was kind of a 2-hour project. I did kind of go into it later on with some different techniques at the studio, but initially it was created Art Slam. And then the other point that I wanted to bring up here was that this is kind of the time when I fell into another branch of the community when I started working at an independent frame shop in Southtown. And I was super young and started working for Andy Benavides, who ended up, you know, he was kind of a framer. He had a frame shop, and I was lucky enough to be one of a few people that worked there. And so at night, this place kind of turned into this like art workshop where they were doing stage flats and signage and commercial art and you know, just all kinds of things. And I just never imagined that there'd be a, you know, I was stuck in picture framing. I was picture framing for years, like 5 years at this point. And I never thought that there'd be this shop where I could actually cross-train into different areas. Mm-hmm. I found that shop, and you know, it was super welcoming, and you know, I was able to kind of pick up a lot of just watching a lot of techniques in paint, as well as in just art business and understanding how to make a living, how to hustle, and that you know, if you stick to it, that, you know, you can. I mean, the shop kind of taught me a lot about art presentation and contemporary art. So that kind of brought my mind away from the, you know, the kind of cartoonish comic book type stuff.
So did the imagery start to change, the subjects?
Sure. I think that, what do I have next? Yeah, okay, the next slide is actually the fruition of that, I think. I think that for all these kind of highlight kind of key points where I learned something. I mean, that's kind of the approach that I took with the slideshow is like, you know, this showed me, or at this point, this was my first studio. And this was kind of an attempt at wheat paste, believe it or not. I was infatuated with wheat paste posters and that whole kind of renegade movement. And this is about 2004, 2005. And so I just kind of created these big works on I guess craft paper, you know, kind of like the worst paper you can use for. And I would paint on it, I would use pastels, and I would just kind of pop colors and just explore painting, you know, continuation of just the techniques I was watching around me. And then a lot of these are kind of paint, watery paint. I'd use spray bottles to make this kind of like distressed look. I'd use, when it dried, I would use Prismacolor pastels on top of it to bring out some, you know, real rich notes, and on and on and on. I mean, use whatever I can. I remember just kind of splashing things on and seeing what would stick and what I liked and didn't like. And then I'd take these pieces, which were on paper, and I'd stick them up with bad batches of wheat paste. I didn't really know what I was doing, but it worked long enough that they were, you know, I was able to kind of leave my studio and put them up, you know, and at night. And
on walls?
On walls, wheat paste them up. And just kind of watch them every day. I mean, where I put them up, they were real close to the studio, and so I could.
So these are
kind of
like public walls, outdoors?
Yes, that's correct.
And how long would they stay up?
I think the truck was up for like 3 months, which was pretty, you know, which felt pretty good. Yeah, I think that Okay, well, this is where I kind of like go into. I think with the other pieces, I mean, I really love how they're crinkled and distressed, and for the public. But it was kind of heartbreaking that, I mean, they don't exist anymore. You know, I mean, they're just kind of deteriorated and stuff. So I started working on canvas and just kind of working large scale.
It's the same subject. You're still interested in these cars and trucks and.
That's right. I have a lot of these reference photos that I would take around town. You know, when I started living in Southtown, I would just, I mean, I was working in the frame shop by day, and then by night I would kind of shoot photos constantly. I remember my camera was like a 3 megapixel camera, and I loved it because it would kind of vignette everything, and it would kind of make things kind of dreamy, and I would use that stuff as reference. And there's a lot of things that I added that weren't in the pictures, but this is, for instance, this is my neighborhood, and you know, it's funny, you don't really see cars like that anymore. Even like 10 years ago when I did this painting, you'd still see stuff like that, and I kind of wanted to capture that before it was gone. And
So these we weren't sharing with the public on the walls. These were more kind of like what we call easel paintings in a sense.
That's right, yeah. I don't think I had any exhibition opportunities at this point for anything this large. This did show at a couple of shows years after, maybe 2 or 3 years afterwards.
And so you're making your art, but not really showing at this time.
Right.
Was
yeah.
was that hard to do? Was it discouraging to you, or was showing the work even consideration?
I don't think that it was really an issue for me. I think that, you know, at that point, I think that it didn't bother me that I wasn't, you know, in the mix or whatever. It just kind of, it was just a compulsion to do something. I was in the art space, and I've always known myself to be someone that creates images. So it was just something that happened. It was not a means to an end. It was just kind of just for fun, just to explore. That first studio was actually really huge, and so I was able to I got inspired by some silkscreen rock poster type coffee table books that showed just different screen printers and what they were doing. I always liked that stuff from like the 60s. What the books that I had were from like the 80s and 90s, and they gave me a lot of ideas. And I met some screen printers that were happy to show me how to do it in a kitchen or in a bathroom, and it just made me feel like, wow, I got this big studio, I can do this here, you know, like do it somewhat properly. And so I started exploring screen printing, and so the imagery is kind of, you know, very, very distinctly, I think, you know, West Side type imagery, West Side San Antonio, very like neighborhood, you know.
Were you getting commissioned to do these?
No. Oh, well, I guess the one on the left was a commission. That was for an annual event that happens in a cultural arts organization here in town. That I would always kind of help. And in fact, that organization was one that the guys in the picture, the group photo, Juan Ramos and Cruz Ortiz and Manny Castillo were the founders of Sonato Cultural Arts. So this is years later, and I'm still kind of connected to them and able to offer my silk screening skills for their annual event. And then the other one on the right is just having fun, trying to figure out, you know, I think I ripped that from a Crayola box and put silkworm. Oh, that's a good point. The silkworm was the name that I chose for the screen printing business that never really did anything, but I kind of thought it was, I found silkworm, I don't know, I think I found that earlier in life and kind of just always stuck with me. I thought if I had anything cool, I would name it silkworm.
You just like that word.
Yeah, it just like seemed cool to me. Like,
So I noticed it's your email address.
Well, yeah, it's I have a gallery. It hasn't been open in a year, but my studio is called Silkworm.
Okay.
And there used to be a gallery run out of there called Silkworm. So yeah, that's kind of, you know, that's
your
my
brand.
thing. Yeah, and that was the first kind of manifestation of it here. And you know, I was able to kind of block out the Crayola letters, put Silkworm, and kind of make it like a little advertisement. And I think at the time I wanted to just make business cards that were hand printed and pass them out and see if anybody wanted rock posters for their gig or something, you know. This is continuation of just exploring San Antonio with my little 3 megapixel camera. There were, I guess I became interested in that stuff because a lot of these spots, a lot of these places are recognizable to me as like landmarks or sort of wayfinding around town. So I always knew that, you know, that my relative lived over here on this street because I knew that, you know, the pecan, you know, building was there or whatever the case may be. And I continued exploring that even with new sites that I didn't know. So I started exploring the South Side a lot and got a lot of good shots of just the neighborhood as it is, you know, day to day. And I liked the idea of not having people around on these photos. And I always kind of I always knew that I was going to use them as a reference for something, but I don't think that I had the direction at the time. But I kind of amassed a huge, you know, photo roll of these images that were similar to these. These are just some selections from that. And I'm working in the frame shop still at this point. I met an artist named Ana Fernandez, and she had a lot of the same reference. Mm-hmm. She had a lot of the same kind of like, you know, desolate, kind of lonely portraits of buildings around town, and some of our reference crossed over. And so we hit it off. Mm-hmm. I started framing some stuff for her through the shop, and she started looking at my photos and really hearing what I wanted to do and what I had in mind, but I didn't really have any direction, like I said. So she took it upon herself to give me some paints out of her stash, and she gave me a block of watercolor paper and handed me a palette loaded up with all her paints. And then she was like, just do what I do. And I'm like, I was kind of scared. I thought, well, I don't want to do what you do, you know? And she kind of just pushed me to just make things, just do it. And so I did. And you know, it was really nice having her encouragement. She's an instructor, so she was able to kind of teach me gouache in particular. And I did a series in gouache kind of out of those photos.
What's the scale on these? How big are these?
These are small. These are 10 by 12. Mm-hmm.
And when you were making these, are you looking at your photographs for reference, right?
Yes.
But then how much liberty do you take in terms of the compositions? Once, like all this graffiti on the building on the lower one, are you sort of being faithful to what exists, kind of an homage to that, or is it you're playing around with it more and interpreting?
Definitely at the time. Although I think that on the bottom one I put a little puppy in there, which was not really there. This is a part of that same series. It became a series. I just did them to show her and to kind of like please myself and please her. And while I was doing that, I was approached by Flight Gallery, Ed Saavedra and Justin Parr. We're studio neighbors. Their gallery was in the building, in Andy's building. And they approached me about having a show pretty quickly. So I went ahead and knocked out a bunch of other pieces based off reference that I had, and did these gouache paintings for a solo show there at Flight. And this is later on. This is about 2011, 2012.
And are these places that like have particular meaning to you, or these are just things that you see in the environment and you respond to?
These actually have a lot of meaning to me. The previous page has a little bit less. These two were first, and I did these because, like I said, I knew my way around town from these places. So Randy's is kind of an old bingo hall, but it's also a live music venue, and some notable acts played there in 70s and 80s, and it's still there on the west side, and it has that sign just like that. And I just kind of wanted to capture, kind of to hint at the rock and roll. I think that the rock thing is always kind of I love all music, but I kind of like I'm from my family is all a bunch of like rockers, mm-hmm. so I've always had that influence in me, and I wanted to kind of, show Randy's as, this kind of revered place, which it really isn't. It should be, but it's not. And then Badia's Grocery, well, that's by St. Mary's University. To me, that's kind of like, that stretch of Culebra is kind of home. That stretch of that part of town is kind of like home to me, and Badia's Grocery is definitely one of the sites that I remember seeing as a kid in the backseat of a car and knowing where I'm at based on the signage,
Mm-hmm.
This is another one from that. This is the flagship piece for that show, and the show was called Falsas Promesas, kind of like broken promises. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because at the time I don't think the payphone was really. I don't think we saw the payphone as endangered, but now it's kind of.
Now you've memorialized it.
Yeah, and this actually is a site. Of course, you could never tell because it's so nondescript. But if you were to kind of like zoom out, this is across the street from Our Lady of the Lake University. So this is kind of like my stop. Anytime I'm in or around that neighborhood, especially when I was in the dorms there, or a lot of family lives near there too, so it's kind of a very familiar site, and sometimes I still go visit. I superimposed that Falsas Promesas. I just kind of ripped that out of. Well, that's actually there was some public work by an artist named John Fechner, and he would kind of go around and do these stencils on desolate buildings in the Bronx, I believe, kind of like 1980. And I'm not sure the tie-in, but it kind of felt like I just really loved his work, and it just kind of opened my mind to a lot of things. And I just kind of, that's literally, I ripped a Xerox copy, a Xerox printout, and stuck it on my painting. Mm-hmm. And I rolled with that. I felt like that was a cool title, and it was a cool piece, and it kind of felt right at home there on the signboard.
These paintings that we've been looking at, these kind of urban scenes, do you have most of those? Are they still around? Were you selling them?
Yeah, I think out of the 9 pieces from that flight show, I have like 3 left. Mm-hmm. So they sold pretty immediately, and yeah.
Did that surprise you?
Yeah, I think so. I was very humbled by it.
Mm-hmm.
They were super cheap.
Mm-hmm.
This is, again, chronological. This is the next chapter, I think. This is where I'm still, feeding off that old reference. But I don't think this one ever felt like a painting to me. So for whatever reason, I picked up the pencil and started just doing it. Pencil's very, very natural to me. There's maybe not pencil, but the drawing period, mm-hmm. because Bic pen is very natural to me. It's just always been something that I do. I did well in school until I figured out that they didn't really mind if I just sketched, through the whole lecture. And so I would fold a paper in half. And I did this for years, and I would just hone my skills as kind of a renderer or a drawer, and just I would have fun with other stuff. But I think reality was kind of my favorite thing to kind of tackle. And so this was the most natural approach for me to take with this reference, was drawing rather than painting.
And just not any reality, it was your reality, right? It was you were interested in sort of what your world.
Sure. And what I mean is realism, mm-hmm. I guess, was always it was always thrilling to, take a ballpoint pen and create something that had depth and dimension and,
mm-hmm.
and
illusion.
Right, and just kind of looked like, so the Fred's Fish one was just for fun. This one was for a series. I think I realized pretty quickly that I needed to be drawing at the time. Maybe not forever, but at the time I felt like, okay, I need to really focus this energy and figure out what I want to say. And then this kind of opportunity came up to showcase some drawings. I didn't have the drawings yet, so what I did for this series was I shot a bunch of reference of old rock I'd say live music venues around town that were kind of sacred to me. And I feel like they're sacred because they're kind of like where I was introduced to live music. And it seemed like a really notable thing because a lot of these places had the rock and they had the punk rock and they had also a lot of conjunto and tejano and regional type stuff. And to me, it's always kind of felt weird. Like to me, there wasn't really any difference. It was always kind of the same thing. I never felt like, like I should separate any genres. I always felt like this is, who we are in San Antonio. We are very much rock and we are very much traditional. So, as far as like traditional types of music, so.
The scale, these still small? You're still working in the
Very
same small?
Yeah, still same scale.
Do you have the desire to push larger, or just was comfortable, or?
I think this was novel to me at the time because I had been working large scale in the first studio, and I think at this point I was already in the second studio, which is much smaller, and so I really liked that it was mobile and kind of clean. I think that's a good point. I really liked that I didn't have to take out paints. I could just draw and put the pencil down, and that's
It's very efficient.
Right, very, very. And so this is another place where we grew up going to shows and stuff. There's the DMZ Clubhouse on the west side. So there's always kind of this I'm always kind of looking for memories that need to be archived, and this is one of them. This is the DMZ. Place is no longer there, but it was kind of a haven for all age type shows that were going on in the 80s and 90s. What I wanted to bring up about this was that this was kind of influenced by Chuck's work, Chuck Ramirez's work. His show just closed here at the McNay.
We all friends?
We were acquaintances through work. When I got to Andy's frame shop, I was kind of thrown into this world where every customer is an artist, And before that, I was working at Michael's, and every customer wanted their diploma frames or whatever. And I think I did see some cool stuff that was floating around. I saw some Tatum stuff, and a local artist here, veteran artist named Tatum. I saw some Rubio at Michael's, and when I got to Andy's, these people were coming in every day, and they had, very, very friendly relationships with the whole community, and I became part of that, and it just felt really cool to watch these things. A lot of things, like I said, that I didn't really understand. Like, I remember Alejandro Diaz was having a lot of work come through the shop, and I think I was too young to get it at the time, and now kind of looking back, I feel like, man, I wish I knew what I know now, because there were all like I said, the community was kind of growing, blossoming at the time when I was there, and it continues to, and so just kind of looking at Chuck's images with the isolated object and the white background made me realize that, I didn't need to worry about background. I just need to worry about the object and how the object makes you feel. And so for a lot of these are kind of like, I would rely on memory, not for reference, but just like I would draw from memories, and I would say, I want to recreate that feeling of that inflatable or that, backyard pool or whatever. And this kind of ties in, I think, still to the setting. I think that in most of my work, it's hard for me to kind of stop conveying the setting. Even when I'm doing these objects, I'm thinking about the setting primarily, and just kind of flowing. As far as technique, I don't remember how I got from point A to point B on a lot of this stuff. It was just kind of being mesmerized and kind of, meditatively going through the motions. And it's never really been a problem to render stuff for me, so I just kind of wanted to render something in particular, and to me that was the setting. And to me, the setting here is childhood, and this is, I know it's very universal, but it was kind of like San Antonio to me. And then I got a scholarship for a course in watercolor through the Southwest School of Art, and studied under Brad Braun. and he kind of showed me the correct way to use watercolor. And so the piece on the bottom right was this watercolor inflatable that I did in 10 minutes using his techniques.
The beach ball?
Yes, and these are larger scale. I think I did the blue and white pool, and then I thought, man, it'd be great to have these life size. You know, so this is kind of I work like 100% life size now. So
this is like 4x4 feet, or the beach ball?
Yeah, well, it's probably 3x3, and then the multicolored one on the top right is full size, full scale.
And you mentioned rendering always came easy. So is that from since your childhood you could always render?
Yeah, but it wasn't. I don't think it was so like a natural gift. I think that was my mom. You know, again, I'm always kind of falling back on. Now that you bring that up, when I'm doing stuff, I'm always thinking about my mom. She still directs me, and it's funny because I'll get in depth into things that she probably, maybe hasn't ventured into, and yet I still hear her telling me, no, do this instead or try this instead. So I think that's really valuable to me, and yeah, I think that, the other thing that kind of guides me again is that art slam thing where I'm kind of fearless when I'm doing these things, and I think that comes from art slam. We'd fall on I showed you a good painting from art slam. You should see the bad ones. I group these together because they have stuff in common, but they're not really from the same time period. I guess they're while I'm exploring drawing, and I've got the full scale thing in mind too, so I'm doing these at 100% or 110%. Well, this is just kind of exploring the pencil. These are all done with one pencil. I'm trying to figure out how to use pencils more appropriately, but for the most part, I get the best results off of using just the different values you can get in one pencil.
And just to clarify, is the pencil a pencil or is it a drawing of a pencil?
That's a photo. I didn't have a better shot of that particular piece, so that's the shot I put on Instagram. It still has my pencil on it. Now this one is kind of a recent piece, and this is to me this is a very dear record. I mean, I remember this from my very young childhood, understanding these songs and hearing these songs of this band. This is a local band, the Latin Breed, and again, for the setting, to me, to me, this is like a backyard party in the early '80s in San Antonio. The music still comes around as a kind of a throwback thing, but I remember just kind of geeking out on the on record covers and on music. And the Latin Breed is kind of like a horn-heavy Tejano band, but they were kind of around the mid-'70s, so they used a lot of funk influence, a lot of James Brown influence, and a lot of kind of a big band sound, and they kind of just went back and forth between like a traditional conjunto or like even cumbia type like Latin beats, and they would come back into. These guys are actually from the neighborhood that I live in, so that's always kind of intriguing to me too, because you can actually flip the record over and go to the address, and it happens to be the recording studio that they used is across the street from my neighborhood mechanic that I use, So this is always kind of like this very like, I feel like that's always kind of, I get to visit home when I see these sites, and even though I never knew these people, I just kind of always feel real connected to that. I remember realizing that the Latin Breed was a local band later on in life, and I think that to me, when I'd hear these records play as a child, I didn't understand that. To me, they were like Chicago or like any of those other '70s bands. They were just all in the mix. Same. Yeah.
So just kind of the sense of nostalgia that is apparent in these works. Is that important that the viewer feel that as well? Do you want to communicate that sense of nostalgia to the viewer, or is that more of a sort of the way it's what motivates you to make the work?
It definitely motivates me to make the work. I do get a thrill out of the kind of, when people get around my work, they usually engage in a lot of storytelling and reminiscing.
Mm-hmm.
But that, and even though I enjoy that, that's never really what I'm going for. I always kind of go for how it makes me feel. And like with this series here, these are things that I felt were very stylish or very cool, like when I was in middle school. And when I was in middle school, I kind of grew up without money, so there were a lot of things that I couldn't have. And you know, like the brand names are so important when you're in like in your youth. And I remember not having these things. And I remember the thrill of drawing them and kind of, it sounds funny, but I felt like I was manifesting them for like once and for all, and dealing with that.
Right.
And then,
Because you made these later as an adult.
yes, I made these
back.
maybe 3 years ago. And they reference 1992 specifically in San Antonio. And again, there's crossover. I'm sure there's universal trends and stuff, but for me, these were kind of I mean, honestly, they're kind of a coping mechanism with like, you know, not being able to afford stuff or not being the, you know, the cool kid. I mean, I was always kind of real awkward and funny and never had the right stuff. And so it was kind of like coping with that. And it's funny because I've looked at these recently and I feel like I feel like I worked through that baggage. And so that's really interesting to me too, because the series that I'm working on now kind of feels like, you know, I'm doing the same thing. I'm confronting these old things that are good or bad, but I'm dealing with them, and the meditative process of drawing them and making them and finishing them, I feel like I'm kind of working through stuff, and I've never really had that experience until recently. As continuation of that, the old pager or beeper, and this one's bigger. Those that you saw are all kind of life size, and of course, because this one's a hoodie, it's I think that's my second venture into doing like a full size garment, and so to me, this is kind of becomes a portrait of those kids that did have that stuff back then. So, you know, I had a lot of fun doing that. I had a lot of fun with the technique and recreating the texture. I like that it connects again to the setting, the region, because these are kind of things that you find, that we find at like Market Square downtown.
Right.
But at that point in middle school, they were very in style, and I included this kind of cross that was also commonplace in middle school, and it was a handmade, you know, beaded cross. And I remember this being really popular, and so when I grouped it with this hoodie, it felt like, man, I'm recreating somebody from middle school, you know. I really like that idea of having it as a portrait. The Ramones one, I think, is I look at the Ramones one as my portrait, honestly. It's kind of the first one in the series, the hoodie being the second one in the series.
As a self-portrait, the Ramones?
I mean, yeah, I guess it feels that way. I mean, it feels like it's mine. That is my shirt. I've had it since I was like, and it was handed down to me, so I've had it since 7th grade or so. You can't wear it anymore, and I considered, you know, framing it, because I framed so many jerseys and shirts and mementos and stuff for work, and I decided to just kind of recreate it in a drawing, and it really, you know, kicked off. It made a lot of lights go off for me, and it made me feel like, you know, this is, you know, these shirts are kind of like how you identify who you are in these formative years, you know, or in those formative years. It was so important. My Ramones shirt was so important, I think, to me, because it conveyed a message, and that was that I could kind of send to anybody, even if I hadn't talked to them. I mean, you look at people at that age, I think you look at people in a room and you look for the ones that have things in common with you, and the ones that are, able to wear certain things that you understand, like Public Enemy, you flock to, and so you're able to kind of. I think that I was trying to analyze it, and I thought it's really interesting, this T-shirt thing that we send messages to each other and
Mm-hmm.
show each other who we are by putting on these messages, and I thought it was really interesting because I don't really wear any shirts with bands or messages on them anymore, but I just think it's really nice and profound, these ways that we connect to each other through screen printing, again, T-shirt,
How long ago was this that you made these?
I think the Ramones one is 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I think both of them are 3
Mm-hmm.
years old. The right one's a commission that Vincent Valdez picked up. So I was really happy to do that. Felt like that came full circle. I was able to put a piece in his collection. This is the most recent piece. And, I did I've done some kind of like activist shirts, which we'll see later on, but it kind of opened up this huge dialogue. I think that it was interesting because I've gotten good feedback, but I've gotten bad feedback about the activist shirts. And for me, I've always felt connected to activism and issues of justice and civil rights, just throughout life. And so when I did those activist shirts, I didn't really realize that there would be people that felt very strongly in opposition to them.
To the message on the shirt?
Yeah, but see, that's interesting to me too now, and I don't quite understand it, and that's what makes it intriguing right now. The T-shirts are the current series, and so what I'm working through right now is trying to figure out, not really trying to figure out, but just being interested in how these T-shirts convey messages and how we kind of judge people based on them, and I've gotten some.
So is it like you're creating these T-shirt drawings, but it's like you're wearing the T-shirt, and the message on the drawing is the message you're giving off? Is that
apparently
the response you're getting?
But like with this one, I think I wanted to kind of just play with that idea a little bit more. It was sparked by a friend, a coworker, actually here at the museum, Ruben Luna, and he asked me if I would consider doing this. And I thought, yeah, I mean, it's throwback. They actually do make shirts that say, "Kill them all, let God sort them out," nowadays, but they don't look like this is from the 80s. And so it was cool because I got to do a throwback shirt. I got it to, it's kind of controversial and kind of ugly. It's kind of really pretty too. I mean, I really like the image, and I'm interested in exploring, that idea, like what I draw on a shirt, like what I wear on a shirt might upset somebody. I understand that, but what I draw on a shirt is also capable of upsetting somebody. I find that really interesting and intriguing. So here's the activist shirts.
So we're showing the one in the middle, Black Lives Matter.
Yes, the sweatshirt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only sweatshirt. So I think that's kind of fun too, because I want to start doing other garments. I like the T-shirt, and I'm getting better at different T-shirts. And I'm having fun. Like you see the white on black ink, and then on the one on the right you see the black on white or black on gray. So I'm having fun with all those techniques and kind of trying to make them feel real and get that texture, and they all kind of have a different texture. The sweatshirt I was really happy with because it felt like a sweatshirt. I was able to make it feel like that kind of puffy, worn sweatshirt when I did the text on it, when I did the copy on it. It came out really nice. I had fun with the cord, the kind of cord that you pull these are all kind of really like fun things to me, and of course, just to me, it was natural to highlight different activist shirts that have kind of happened through the decades. This is totally different. This is public work, and you know, when I had that group shot of, you know, us painting as kids, they taught us mural techniques. Mm-hmm. They taught us mural history also. They taught us how to find reference and how to. They taught us everything really in the basics, and then they had us painting on walls. And recently, I've been able to kind of explore that a little bit more. And then this is kind of cool too, because I have, you know, while I'm doing all this studio work, some of my closest friends are doing public work, doing outdoor work, and doing mural work. And so I was able to kind of get some projects this past year or two. And I relied on some kind of basic imagery. The one on the right was actually before the one on the left. It happened a couple years ago, and it was kind of spontaneous. I happened to be at the museum working, and I was installing, and they needed someone to paint something on their exterior wall.
Where is that?
That's in Austin at Mexicarta Museum. Mm-hmm. And they asked, they said, "Hey, can you do a mural like tomorrow?" And of course I said yes. I mean, it hadn't even crossed my mind, and my brain started going, and I thought, yeah, let's do it. And kind of worked with the staff a little bit to try to figure out what I wanted to say. Being that it's Mexicarta Museum, I wanted to kind of give it a sense of like identity and pride. And so I chose the phrasing based off of an old dicho or an old phrase that's used. Tengo el nopal en la frente means I have a cactus right here on my face and in front, you know. And it's a phrase that's meant to identify someone who maybe is trying to escape who they are or where they come from. And this is kind of a twist on that phrase. And it's kind of saying, it's kind of claiming it with pride and saying, I have a cactus, I have an nopal, you know, as opposed to it being derogatory or accusational or whatever. So, but I had a lot of fun. I mean, that font I've been wanting to use in public for a long time. I've used it in silkscreen before and never had a real impact. On this project, I was able to kind of get that good impact. I referenced some old movie title screens. Mm-hmm. If you look at Mexican movies in the 70s, you'll see this kind of crazy, and I even put the kind of like the blackout on top and bottom to make it feel like a cinematic. And I really just kind of rolled up that paint off of some scrap paint that they had there. It all worked together. The color scheme worked together fine, thankfully. And it happened in 2 days, got it done, knocked it out, and it's gone now. It's a rotating mural project, so every 3 months they get a new mural. Then I got asked to do a mural on Southside. This is via Main Road, close to the ghost tracks, for anyone here in town that's familiar with the ghost tracks. So it's kind of this isolated place where Loop 410 goes over this tiny two-way road, but everybody in town goes by out there, and so it was really fun. There were 4 murals, one for each season. I got summer, and I was selected because of the other piece that I had done, and was asked to kind of recreate it, and I kind of got to do that and get a little more intimate with the piece and kind of render it out a little bit more where I wasn't on a time limit. And I'm really amazed that the one on the right came out so quickly, because that's literally 7 hours of work on the right versus probably 80 hours on the left.
And the one on the left's still around?
Yes. Yeah. Just recently got restored, and yeah, it's still there.
Well, I think our time is up, but Joe, I want to thank you for sharing so much and being so open about your work and what motivates you and the stories behind it. It was really inspirational. So thank you so much, and thanks everybody for joining us here tonight.
Thank you.